Welcome to the Creative Condition podcast with me, Ben Tallon, illustrator and creativity coach, founder of the Creative Condition, artist and writer. I bring 20 years of creative industry experience and a lifelong love of creativity, a fundamental pillar of human happiness, to you through ongoing personal exploration and the shared experiences of others. You'll get a nourishing mix of creative industry professionals and people far and wide using creativity in ways that can take our learning to the next level so we can maximise our unique blend. The show has been supported from day one by Illustration X, a tremendous illustration agency representing a shining global roster of illustrators and animators over at illustrationx.com. The music for the show is by Dirty Freud, who you can listen to now on all good streaming services. And for everything else, for my coaching, resources and inspiration, head to thecreativecondition.com. There we go. Morning, guys. Welcome to the Creative Condition podcast. I am Ben Tallon. This is a Brew Brain Dump, and it's been a little while, hasn't it? I've had a bumpy couple of weeks, a bit of anxiety, a bit of stress and a few things in between, but I'm feeling better. I'm feeling good on the other side. And it's not been constant. It's not been awful. It's just been challenging. You know, I don't want to say low-level anxiety because there were peaks in there. And it's the usual stuff, tired brain, hot weather, not sleeping as well as you did, and then letting things that you generally have control over, as in, okay, there's always financial panic because we chose this creativity freelance path, and that comes with massive peaks and massive troughs. And I know that. I've been doing it 18 years, but sometimes on those days when you're lacking computing power because the nights have been bad and all that stuff, it gets to you. And what happens is, I had a brilliant description from a good friend of mine who I've just done a coaching session with, who described that anxiety brain. I used the analogy iron filings on a magnet where they just keep coming and it pulls in all of your problems and amplifies them as they stick to this black hole force of energy. And my client described it as a chewing gum. When you drop a piece of chewing gum and you try picking it up and then it gets stuck to the floor and then it's got hair on it. I love that. It's a dirtier version, but it's great. Anyway, welcome. I'm okay. I'm feeling a bit better. It's nothing new. That's the thing. It's nothing new, and it's been worse for me since parenthood. But what I'm doing is getting better at making sure I continue to teach myself and understand the way my brain works so I have a degree of control over it. But that's not why I'm here to talk to you today. I'm here with this Brew Brain Dump, sponsored as ever by the wonderful founding sponsor of the show, Illustration X, whose portfolio, as you can see now, illustrators and animators and everything in between at illustrationx.com. Thank you. I'm here to drop a little brain dump on you, and today's is about, I wanted to talk about something. It's one of the major downsides of my job as a freelance illustrator, and it's one of the major upsides as my more recent work as a creativity coach. And I wanted to just juxtapose the two to show something that I find to be majorly lacking from the world of a freelancer who spends a lot of time alone. So, to preface this, I love my job as an illustrator. It has been my dream job for the last 18 years, and I continue to do it. But as my passion for creativity and the human condition and helping people grows, I'm following that path, and that's growing. And it gives me sometimes a challenge to balance the two, but usually variation that my brain needs. And it brought about an observation of something that I had been sorely lacking, that I have found through my teaching and my coaching work, that I think is something to be aware of for anybody who is going to pursue a career as a freelance illustrator or artist or designer. It doesn't really matter the discipline. What I want to look at is the disposability aspect and what that does to us emotionally. Because I didn't realize just how much of an emotional kick-in it was giving me when I was spending not just too much time alone as an illustrator. I'm very fortunate in that I saved hard, I worked hard, and I commissioned a little garden studio when we moved to Salisbury. It's very modest size, very small, but it's enough for me to have a little audio corner, a messy desk, and a little office desk. And it's got 2 meters of shed tacked on the back for some storage. It's great. It's a dedicated workspace. I get to step out of my house, walk down my garden, and I'm in work. Now, the pitfall of that is I spend a lot of time alone in that garden. Even when my wife is working in the front room, which she sometimes does as a designer in publishing, when the kids are sometimes home, even with all that going on, you still spend a lot of time on your own. Now, podcasts can be very cathartic for that. Audiobooks can feel like company at times. There are ways to manage that. And on the good days, I adore that solitude. But there's another layer to this, and I don't think I'd quite clocked it until recent years, and it is the disposability of the remote freelancer. It's about validation and self-worth and belonging. Belonging is not just a major part of this framework that I teach through my pit stops and through the creativity coaching that I do now, but it's just a massive part of the human life force. Now, I was watching Stutz again last night because I'd had this bumpy patch again. I wanted to get back to the drawing board in terms of reminding myself of the tools that are at my disposability to change the way that I respond to any perceived threat or adversity. So I went back to Stutz because it had a profound effect on me when I had a big low during early parenthood. Stutz, if you're not aware, Stutz, is a film on Netflix, a documentary about psychotherapist Phil Stutz. It's by his client, Jonah Hill. You'll know Jonah Hill, and whether you feel one way or another about Jonah Hill, I know that he has a real, a divisive effect on certain people. I think it's largely media-driven, but there we are. And Jonah Hill, he recognised that not everyone could afford a psychotherapist as unique and as elite as Phil Stutz. We're talking A-list Los Angeles people. So he made this film to make the tools that had made his life better that Phil had given him accessible for more people through Netflix. Certainly had that impact on me. I went and bought Phil's book, The Tools, off the back of it, again, to get even deeper in that. And it's all about mechanisms to flip your way of thinking when you enter negative thought spirals. It's about not going around under a cloud of negative thought, because negative thoughts come way quicker, as per the chewing gum and iron filings analogy, than positive thoughts. We have to actively work to get ourselves back in a positive thought cycle. But it's amazing that when you do, just how many things you can turn around and still feel good, even though there are threats. That's what I've been doing. And as part of Phil's teachings, he kicks off with this triangle called the life force, and it's about the pyramid of human needs. We're not talking Maslow, we're not talking the full-on hierarchy of human needs. Go and look that up if you're not aware of it. It's very good. But this one is about your relationship with yourself, your relationship with your body, and your relationship with other people, community. Now, community is absolutely critical. Now, I often say it on this show, but art school to me was some kind of apex in terms of leaving school where I felt relatively alone because I hadn't made any true connections that I would go on to make with friends in my local area, in my industry once I got into the arts and university. Art college was the first time I walked through a door and immediately felt resonance with people who were also there through a shared passion, who were there wearing their own clothes, who cared about the things they cared about just as much as I cared about my things. It was amazing. It was incredible. And I've looked for it ever since. And what I hadn't realised in the fog of early parenthood is that my role as a freelance illustrator, despite all its benefits, wasn't giving me the community that I needed, especially since I left London and Manchester, major cities where I was a part of my local creative industry meetup networks. Now, it dawned on me during a conversation with close friend and fellow illustrator Danny Allison. You might remember him if you're a long-term listener of this show. He was my very first episode back in 2015. Go back and listen to that one if you haven't. It's absolutely timeless and it's inspiring. And Danny highlighted the fact that we work with people. Now, I'll give you an example. I've got an original client that was one of my earliest clients. I haven't even seen his face. He's been an email for, oh my God, that must be 16 years. Now, that's not to take away from the relationship. He supported me throughout. We've had great chats over email. He bought my Kickstarter package for the book. And we continue to work together on the occasional project. So he's very valuable. When I think of him, I get a feeling of warmth. But he's an email. He's a name on an email. That is so far away from that magic of art college, of being in a room with people and in a hive of activity, that it was only when I started to do the coaching and I started to recognise the immediate impact that this work was having on people, transformational in some cases, talking to people about their deepest worries, their deepest fears and their biggest dreams, and helping them to ground in the here and now, to get to understand and love the person they are, and point that forwards in a way that we all felt like we were back in art college. It's just that industry and constraints and rivers of thinking all get in the way along the way, and we end up just doing the job per a job description, and we kind of stop to think about the human fundamentals about why that job is right, and is it right anymore? Do we course correct along the way? I hadn't course corrected because, how could I? I was absolutely wiped out, exhausted, not sleeping well, new father, a lot on my plate. But when I got a little bit more clarity of mind and I started to coach, I realised that as much as I still adored my job as an illustrator, I was an outlier. I was on the peripheries. I could work with the best agencies in the world, but I was still sat here in my garden studio. And I would still be routinely ghosted. I would get these gushing emails about an opportunity and we would love to work with you. We think you're perfect for this. And you feel this kind of nice, half-baked version of what community needs to give us as human beings. And you would have a call, maybe you'd have a call, see a few faces, and you'd get excited about the ideas and you'd bounce those ideas back and forth, and then, boomf, gone. Puff of smoke, ghosted. Found a better opportunity. If you're lucky, maybe a few months down the line, you might get an email going, so sorry, it's been hectic, we had to go another route in the end. Now, this happens on I'm talking maybe an 85-90% ratio of queries. Over time, especially as a 42-year-old man having to provide for 2 young children, that's soul-destroying. It really started to get to me. But what my coaching work did was put me back in a room with people who I was not just helping and not just grateful that they'd booked me to help them in their creative careers. But I make a bond with every single person because I'm an empath, and I talk about hormones and I talk about anxiety, and I help people with recommendations like the film Stutz and book recommendations. And it's a massive creative act because I sit down and I have a big puzzle, which is an individual person's makeup. And it's my job to interpret that and put an action plan in place to help them with the stuff that it is now on impossible to help themselves with, because it's their own situation. And how many of us can help ourselves logically with clarity? None of us, because we're living our lives in this 1,000 miles an hour too much world. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. The brew is almost finished. This has been slightly longer than normal, but my point is this. Do not stick to an old belief that this is the dream job for you if it ceases to be the dream job for you along the way, even in just a modicum. Now, don't get me wrong. I love illustration. I am desperate for illustration work. I always am. I always was. I always will be in some capacity. Art projects, live art, branding jobs. I love it. I love the work. It fulfills me. I get to listen to podcasts while I work. I get to talk to awesome people. But when it lacks the art school energy and being in close contact with people and getting the inspiration, I need to get that from somewhere. Maybe you do too. That's all I'm saying. So acknowledge those needs and do never place guilt on yourself for being less than grateful. It doesn't mean you're not grateful. It means that maybe some part of it needs to be compensated for your mental health. That's enough. Cheers for spending this brew with me, guys. Have an awesome week, and I'll see you for the next main episode next week. Cheers. Oh, and if you want to access any of these coaching opportunities, head to thecreativecondition.com now, thecreativecondition.com/coach, and you'll have all the info. Drop us a message, we'll have a chat. Everything else is on there, the reading list. There's plenty of free resources. There's over 300 podcast episodes with golden advice from not just people in the creative industry, but doctors and firefighters and athletes and coaches and psychotherapists and neuroscientists, because that's my take on creativity. I want to explore it in its broadest sense. So head there now, thecreativecondition.com. Cheers for being with me, guys. Have a great day.